Et j'ai compris.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Jai Guru. Hello, hello.
Okay.
Finally, this machine wouldn't let me sign in.
We're here.
Mhm. I've mentioned in the past that, or fairly recently, that I, when I recognize I'm doing, uh, I'm causing myself trouble, or like if I get angry, I'm doing it to myself. But then when it becomes evident that there is no self in that sense of myself, so then, but then I guess, well, it occurred to me to ask, well, is it the self doing this key stuff to itself? But then even to say that is taking on, coming from a perspective of Keith, uh, assuming that the self is some kind of a self that does something to itself.
Space
So,
doesn't do anything. It's everywhere all the time.
what's
So
that?
there's not the space doesn't do anything. It's everywhere all the time. Your presence is more subtle than sky or space. So if at all you want to compare, like Maharaj says, compare yourself to sky or space. And you break out of that bubble of illusion of who's doing and what's doing and how is this body being animated and all this sort of thing. How is a body in your dream being animated? It's a dead body in your dream, just like it's a dead body in this waking dream.
Well,
And
is it some kind of imagination that's animating it?
you're in other it's these are appearances that are appearing within your own spontaneous presence. And again, in a dream, what animates the dream? There's a subtle power, energy, whatever you want to call it. The bodies in the dream seem to be material bodies whilst you are dreaming. Like tonight, you're not going to walk through someone and be like, oh, well, that's just a dream person. And I know that because I can walk through them. No, they're very material. Mm-hmm. In your dream, the entire dream world that's projected from your dream consciousness, so to speak, is absolutely material. Everything is just as solid as it is in the waking dream. So there's what is the power and the energy? Or it has to be you. You're all there is. But you're not doing it deliberately. There's no specific powering of something. Just like Maharaj uses the very good example of electricity. You plug a lamp into the wall and it lamps, it lights up. You plug a TV into the wall and it does its thing. This is now the TV. You plug your cell phone into the wall and it charges. But the electricity doesn't say, oh, I'm taking the form of a cell phone charging, or I'm taking the form of a lamp lighting, or I'm taking the form of this instrument over here, this TV. I know it doesn't know what to do. The instrument itself is there for a specific purpose, and sort of within this illusory existence, that's what the power does. The power powers Keith and everybody, Beth and myself and Trish and all of us. This power is just animating this dead body. We know this because when that power, when that energy, when this body essence can no longer sustain that, this is just a dead body. It's a dead body now. There's just the appearance of life because of the livingness that spontaneous presence is providing. And just like in a dream, the dream consciousness is providing the apparent livingness of this dream person. But there's no existence at all. And you know this when you wake up from the dream. Like, oh my gosh, what happened to all the dream people? You're dreaming you're at a nice park and all the kids are playing. And you wake up, oh my God, like, where did all these kids go? And you can't search for them the next night. You go into dream and you say, oh, where did these kids go? I have to find these kids. Because these kids were an appearance within the dream consciousness. And just as all of the objects that you're observing are appearing within the waking consciousness, because there isn't a separate waking and dreaming consciousness. There is the concept, I am dreaming and I am awake, due to identification with a body form and the concept of separation being impressed. The reality is, consciousness is creating, whether in waking or whether in dream. There's absolutely no difference.
What is created doesn't really exist, but the creator exists.
Well, there's no creation, just like in your dream. You could say, okay, Keith is laying down sleeping and a dream world is projected. Did Keith create this dream world?
No.
Like, did you like sit there and say, okay, I'm going to have grass and I'm going to have this? No, it's just spontaneous. A scene has appeared due to the knowingness that I exist. Because in deep sleep, this entire world, this dream world, disappears. But then there's a little bit of knowingness, this sense of existence, boom, dream world is projected. Because that formless presence, whether you have the concept of dreaming or the concept of being awake, is just creating due to the sense of existence. When the sense of existence is no longer there, there will be no longer a dream. That's why when you know yourself in a real sense right now, you understand, oh, it's just like, it's not true. No matter how real it may appear to be.
But at that point, you know that you exist, but nothing else exists.
Well, the you that you are is existence. The sense of existence has appeared to that which existed, but had no concept, I exist. When the concept I exist came, this is where the concept of duality was immediately impressed, because I exist. Something has experienced existence. And in that moment of the experience of existence, boom, a dream world is created. Just as when Keith lays down at sleep, you start sleeping, it's like very deep. And all of a sudden, a little knowingness stirs, boom, a dream world is created and Keith is within the dream world.
And that's when it appears that there are forms forming.
Correct. But there's no forms forming in your dream. Even though materialistically you could say, and that's why, like Das Bode tries to explain the fire and the water and all the elements getting together, because it's the same in the dream. You could say, well, what causes these bodies? Well, the 5 elements. We can break down this dream body into the 5 elements of earth and a little bit of air and a little bit of fire and some water to make the body moist, and we call it blood or whatever you want to say. But these are the same building blocks that you could dissect and say these dream characters are manifested from the 5 elements. But the 5 elements don't exist, because when you wake up in the morning, where's these 5 elements? And prior to beingness, where's these 5 elements? After leaving the body, where's these 5 elements? And again, now Keith is going to say, oh, but when Keith leaves the body, what happens to Keith? But Keith is a lump of goo animated by the presence that always is and never cannot be. That presence that you are, we say eternal only because of a body-based concept of time. So we say eternal. But there's no time, no space. There's just your own self. And whilst you're within this waking dream, holding this body, you can know yourself in a real sense. So that as this body ages, as it does, we talked about even if you put an orange on the table, it ages and deteriorates eventually, but it doesn't affect you at all. The presence in the orange isn't dying. When the orange deteriorates, it gets mushy and is then put back into the earth. The elements go to the elements, and the presence that was animating and providing the livingness of this orange just is no longer providing the livingness to that orange. But the one who's observing the orange and the one who's identified with the quote observer of this is your own self, formlessly. That's why you hear seeing without the concept of a seer, quote, clear, present seeing. And you'll notice that there's no touch of body, there's just seeing. And when you say touch of body, you mean like, oh, how I'm viewing this scene. Oh, I like it, I don't like it, it's nice. Maybe I would change this about it. This is where the body-based impressions come in, and you identify with the thought stream. But when you're just cleanly seeing without the seer and without a concept of a seer seeing, then it's just seeing and no local identification. When there's a local identification, then pain and pleasure, what I'm seeing, I don't want to see this, or I want to see more of this. That dualistic thinking comes in because of identification with a body form, seeing something. And as soon as you're seeing something, you become a thing. But as you remain with your selfless self, and as you know yourself in a real sense.
Is that what you call the subtle presence?
Subtle presence is just I, I without anything. Nothing. And then there comes a time where you understand that there's something that knows this presence and that you are. And whether that presence, on which, by the way, the entire world is projected, whether that presence is there or not there, you are. Because you're prior to the sense of presence. The sense of presence has appeared to you. And that was the knowledge of existence. Oh, there's something. And that's the first concept. The illusion begins. I am, I exist, is the primary concept on which all concepts are built. The one to whom the I exist appears, the knower of the sense of I existence, is there, that you are. And there's no need to know that you exist or don't exist. Now that you're in body form, you know, oh, I exist. And then you're scared that when the body's no longer there, the sense of existence leaves, and you'll be like, oh, what happens when I don't sense my own existence? Think about how silly that sounds if you're just even in the human being state. What happens when I don't sense my existence?
There would be nothing to fear.
Because see, when we say all of everything or nothing, but it's the same, because everything is illusion, and that you are is not illusion. So you could say it's not a thing, nothing. And everything is illusion because there is nothing. And that's why it's very nicely put, except your selfless self, there's no God, no Brahman, no Paramatman, no master, nothing is there. except your selfless self, on which this entire world has appeared. And being in body form, you remain with your selfless self. When you're seeing without the concept of a seer, acting without the concept of an actor, working without the concept of a worker, life is quite beautiful. And there can't be a place to hang the hook of thought when there's nothing there. That's why Maharaj very beautifully says, do your job, do your duties, take care of all your responsibilities. Whatever arises in front of you, do the best at the moment. I'm thirsty, I pick this up. I drink, I put it down. Yes, I'm using body, but then it's finished. I don't have to take an identification as a drinker drinking.
So when this is like, sometimes it's apparent to me that I am none of what I experience.
Hmm?
So that's
Well, you're not experiencing anything either. He's the mechanism,
experience.
the little experience machine, I guess you would call, with the sensations and all this sort of stuff, is sort of reporting back in a way to the formlessness, but all of that is illusion. You understand? Formlessness is not experiencing anything. How?
But the form isn't experiencing anything either, because it's dead.
Well, the form the form is appearing to experience, and then that is being registered as I'm experiencing. This is my experience.
That's
But
the
it's
way.
not true.
Yeah, that's the trick or the why.
Well, think about when you lay down to sleep, if you were sleeping and you dreamt about swimming. Now, the action, the activity of swimming is appearing to be real. In the dream, if you cease swimming, you'll drown. You know, you'll have the sensation that, oh, I'm not swimming and now I'm underwater. But none of that was true.
It just seems. It's all the seeming stuff.
Of course, because of identification with one of the appearances as this is my action. I am swimming or I am not swimming. Or maybe I'm floating. Oh, it feels so good to float. Until a big wave hits me and then, oh, I have water up my nose. But then you wake up. It's not true. No water, no swimming, no not swimming.
In that moment, it was true, isn't it?
It wasn't true, but it
seemed true.
appeared so.
Seems so.
Exactly. I mean, how could you say that Keith swimming in his dream was ever true?
No.
It seems so because everything else combined kind of to conspire to make it seem.
Well, because your identification with Keith swimming. When you know yourself in a real sense, Keith is not swimming. Swimming is happening. Okay.
So there's no translation of being into action then?
The sense of being is what creates the concept of action and doership. Through egoistic sense, I exist as something.
So there's none of that.
In reality, no. Again, if at all you want to compare, you compare yourself to sky or space and answer this question. From the sky or space's perspective,
But
is the sky doing anything?
Yeah, I guess I still always get the idea that, okay, now I feel free or something. I have improved my existence because now I feel free rather than feel confined.
From the body-mind perspective, there is a sense of expansion and freedom as the body pressures are kind of loosened. I told you, I experienced this in the ashram when all this was happening, the bhajans were going, and I told Maharaj, I said, my God, it feels like I'm expanding and the entire ashram is within myself now.
Right.
And from the perspective of a body-mind, loosening the grasp on the individual local identification, this is the experience. But Maharaj can quickly tell you there's no experience, no experiencer. This subtle experience of expansion is due to identification with the body and the body pressures loosening, but there never really was any body pressure to begin with. You're just now seeing more clearly that I am not this body. I was not this body, and I'm not going to remain this body. Body's not my identity.
So I keep getting to that sort of those points where it's loosening and stuff a lot fairly often, but I don't know what's going to happen if that disappears too.
Well, that's the nectar of immortality that you sip on.
Mm.
And as Nisargadatta Maharaj says, what happens if you drink poison? You're going to die. Yes? Well, if you drink the nectar of immortality and you continue the nectar of immortality, you will release the grip on the body completely and know yourself in a real sense. And then do your job, do your duties.
So that's why you
take
say
care of all your responsibilities.
that's why you say it's best to just remain in that.
Absolutely. Rather than try and figure it out, sip on that nectar of immortality. Just, oh yes, just die, just die.
Eventually it'll open up.
As things start to appear that might need your attention, there will be a knowingness that this does not need my attention. In the moment, okay, we do this, but it's finished now. There's nothing so important that I cannot remain with my selfless self. And as I'm remaining with my selfless self, I'll see that the so-called actions, the so-called doing, is done quite nicely without me having to form an identification of a drinker drinking water.
Really, you don't even have to form the identification.
No, you are that. You know yourself in a real sense. And then it's just like when you're looking out, you're seeing, and there's a lot of things to see, but there's no judgment about the seeing. It's just because there's no seer. Without a seer, when I say without a seer, I mean identification as this body, John, is seeing the world. Therefore, John, with all the conditioning and all the identification with the thoughts flowing, can judge the world. But when there's no John there and there's just clean seeing from that place that you are.
So even identification is stopping at that point.
Well, see, identification is a false concept to keep the illusion of duality perpetuating. Without identification, the illusion of duality is like you're seeing, but there's no longer a you in a world. You know, there's no longer like, oh, there's a world out there and it's very scary and there's lots of people and all this. It's just one big kind of scene. And that's how we talked about scenes appearing and disappearing, scenes appearing and disappearing.
So there you see it's taking care of itself.
It's doing that now. It's only because of identification with the thoughts that are flowing that Keith is taking care of things. You're sort of stealing credit for things that are being done naturally and creating this Keith that then is bothering you and you wish to remove. That's why they talk about that thief.
So you are admitting that things are taking care of themselves, and those things.
Nisargadatta Maharaj likes to say the universal consciousness. Again, in your dream, everything's taking care of itself. There's nobody writing the script. Keith is not, before he goes to bed, like typing down words and saying, okay, this guy's going to say this, and this lady's going to say this, and they're going to walk their dog. You're not doing that. It's spontaneous. And it's the same right now. No one's writing a script. You can say the universal, see, if you know yourself in a real sense, I am not body, then you're no longer thinking that the mind and the thinking process and all the creativity is coming from this little thing here, because you're not identified with a form. Therefore, the world is the mind.
It still seems that the preferences are determining somewhat, the direction of things.
As long as there's identification with a body form that I am Keith, yes.
There's going to be preferences, though, isn't there? For the body.
It's spontaneous in the moment. It's not
That's true. I guess sometimes it does go beyond preferences. They become kind of irrelevant.
Illusion, body-based illusion. Do I like chocolate or do I like vanilla?
Mm,
Somebody says, "Oh, would you like chocolate or vanilla, Keith?" "Oh, I like chocolate."
yeah,
Why not vanilla? Really
yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah.
And but this is silly because then this is egoistic spirituality.
Yeah, they do. So yeah, preferences can be seen to have no relevance, I guess.
You're dreaming tonight, and you see someone walking a dog. You could say, "Well, why'd they pick that dog?" You know, let's say you're dreaming and you're watching this couple and they're walking their dog around a lake.
Mm.
Well, why did they pick that dog?
They like the way it looked.
It's a dream. There's nobody doing anything. There's no sense of, oh, I love this kind of dog. What? They might even say with the dream, I really like this little dog, and give you a whole story about the dog. But it's not true. When you wake up, you know that was a very nice little thing, but it was not true.
So then everything loses its relevance. Yes.
Except your own self. And so you don't have to figure this out. If you give this to mind and you say, oh, mind, nothing matters, then you become like nihilistic of like, oh, it just doesn't
Right.
matter and I can do whatever I want. But when you remain with your selfless self, there's not this thought process of I can do whatever I want. Who's this I who wants to do whatever it wants? And
So that becomes irrelevant too.
of course, you are.
John, selfless self is universal consciousness.
Selfless self is that to whom this universal consciousness would appear. Universal consciousness appears due to the concept I exist. There's a creation, like just like a dream at nighttime, the sense of existence creates a dream world. All those individuals within that dream are appearing and acting autonomously and have their own hopes and dreams and all this sort of stuff because you can carry on conversation. So you could say that the dream consciousness is the universal consciousness, or you could say that the dream is created from nothing, becomes something, and goes back to nothing. In the same way, in the waking state, there's nothing, there's something, it goes back to nothing. And nothing is not nothing like just a blank or a void, because in order to have a void, there has to be something there that experiences a void. And there's no experience, no experiencer. The concept of experience came along with that I exist, I am. And the first experience is I exist. And then there's identification with the body form because the sense of existence is identified with the body. Oh, I exist as mom and dad said, John, I am John. Then John does good things. John does bad things. John has a life. John has to do these things. John has to go to school, all these sort of things. But that you are is not John. Never was John. Just like a dream character never was whoever they were.
So you're not the doer, but what's doing?
Nothing. Nothing's happening. Nothing will ever happen. How? How can anything actually happen? Everything that happens is an appearance within the bubble of illusion.
But the universal consciousness or the